Hello, this is Sarah Brosh. Welcome back to my channel. So I want to do a video about Fasil Nahum and how he inspired my Yale PhD dissertation, my Saving the World project. And it's a really interesting story. So Fasil Nahum is one of the primary authors of Ethiopia's current constitution. And at the time when I met him, he was the senior legal advisor to the then Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Meles Zenawi. Meles Zenawi has since died. So I am going to be talking about an experience I had in 2008. So in the spring of 2008, I was at Fordham Law School in New York City, and I was part of the Human Rights Clinic that semester, and I was part of the group that went to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia for a week. And of course, we had spent the entire semester preparing for that trip beforehand. And so our project was taking a look at the extrajudicial constitutional interpretation of Ethiopia's constitution. So Ethiopia's constitution is fascinating for this reason, for many reasons, but for this reason. So in Ethiopia's constitution, and this sounds very counterintuitive to most Americans because we obviously are used to our Supreme Court being the final arbiter of constitutional interpretation in the U.S. And, is it Marbury v. Madison? Which one is it? Oh, I forgot. Anyway, the famous quote, "It's a constitution," we're expounding, or I think that's the quote. Anyway, so what's fascinating about Ethiopia's constitution is that the Supreme Court and all of the courts they are prohibited from interpreting the Constitution. They can only apply it, and the body that is responsible for constitutional interpretation is a parliamentary body that represents the interests of not the individual citizens of Ethiopia, but the peoples and nations of Ethiopia. So the disparate, because Ethiopia is in and of itself a diaspora of disparate ethnic and religious and linguistic groups. I think there's some 80, or no, that's probably too, I don't know, but there's just a ton of different ethnic and linguistic and religious, and racial groups represented within Ethiopia itself. So this is a fascinating aspect of Ethiopia's constitution, current constitution, drafted in no small part by Fasil Nahum, who was the senior legal advisor to then Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Meles Zenawi. Now, I don't know, Fasil Nahum is still living. I don't know, and I know he's still very much involved in Ethiopia's government, but I don't know what position he currently holds. I didn't check. But anyway, so we went, the one other thing I want to say about Ethiopia's constitution is that it has this beautiful, glorious list of individual rights enumerated. And so what we were studying was, what impact does it have on individual human rights when constitutional interpretation is not the purview of the courts or the Supreme Court of Ethiopia, but the parliamentary body that represents the interests of the peoples and nations of Ethiopia. So what kind of impact does this have on individual human rights? So and constitutional rights. And so we went to Ethiopia. We worked with Addis Ababa Law School and with some specific law school students and professors there. And we went to Ethiopia for a week and we just interviewed everyone, judges, human rights activists, and then of course Fasil Nahum. So we met with Fasil Nahum in the presidential palace, and it was really interesting. And I still know how to say in Amharic, thank you and how are you. And so thank you is amasakanalo, and then how are you, you say dana, and then if you're a male you respond danana, and if you're female you respond dananish. And so I used this very limited language skills to charm the military personnel guarding the presidential palace when we went to meet with Fasil Nahum. So with the, machine guns. And so then we went and met with Fasil Nahum. So now I was asking him some very pointed questions about the impact on individual human rights of the, as I've described, the fact that, Ethiopia's constitution can only be interpreted by this parliamentary body representing the peoples, the nations of Ethiopia. So he was getting irritated with me. And so he said to me quite sort of forcefully, pointedly, he said to me, "You will always have tyranny. You have only to choose. You can choose tyranny of the minority, as you have done in the United States, or you can choose tyranny of the majority, as we have done in Ethiopia." And what he was referring to is, he was referring to the U.S. Supreme Court and how, it's just a small number of persons who, get to rule on what the Constitution means. And that impacts the lives of, in the U.S., 30, 50, 70 million people. And so what he was saying to me was that in Ethiopia, they had decided that it is all of the people, or at least the parliamentary body that represents the interests of the peoples of Ethiopia, that should get to decide that. And that was tyranny of the majority. But what I was most struck by was just the fact that he told me that tyranny was ineluctable. And so I really set out on my Saving the World project at that point, really. I mean, it was sort of percolating in my mind, but it was really at that point where I just explicitly and specifically set out to prove him wrong. I wanted to prove him wrong, that tyranny was not, a necessary cornerstone of our social, legal, political institutions as human beings. And what's interesting now is that I really sort of decided that, well, he was kind of right. But anyway, so he was kind of right. But what I'm doing now is I really see my Yale PhD dissertation as, I still see it as my Saving the World project. I see it as a human rights project. So what I'm trying to do now is, I do think that we don't build our social institutions without oppression and propaganda. And yes, I do think you could construe that statement, or just that fact, as meaning that systemic racism does exist, it is real. But what I'm trying to do now is, I see my project as an analysis of how to minimize that oppression that is inherent to our social institutions. So that's what I'm trying to do now. So I have so many crazy stories about that experience in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. It was just like it was so amazing, and it was just amazing. It was an amazing experience. So just one funny thing that happened, I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's also sort of sad in a way too, is that we had a driver, an Ethiopian driver, that drove us everywhere for the whole week. And then so he was insisting, and everyone was insisting at Addis Ababa Law School, was telling us we had to go to the Lion Zoo. We had to go to the Lion Zoo. So we went to the Lion Zoo, and it was really just this, circular open air building with these like cement, cubicles that lions were in. And they actually had a liger there too, in a different building nearby, and the liger looked really unhealthy. And I know that they do tend to be unhealthy, and it was just kind of really sad. And you sort of walked around on this concentric cement circle, right up next to the lions, and everyone was encouraging us to pet the lions, to put our hands inside the fence. It was just like, like a regular metal, chain link fence, and you could stick your hand through it if you wanted to and pet the lion. And I kind of did, but just like the back flank of the lion, like I didn't really put my hand in. I just kind of like put my hand up against the fence. And I have a picture of me standing next to one of the lions. So all of these school kids were outside. So there's a concentric circle around the circular perimeter of the place, and there's a fence, a tall fence, and like all these kids, these school kids in their uniforms, like they all like rushed the fence, and they were all standing there, and they were all just like so excited and giggling. And then I realized, and I think that this is something that they always do, and I don't know if our driver was in on it, but so what they do is you walk around, and then they have this one lion, and I think the kids were expecting it. And like our driver, like our Ethiopian driver, was just like, he just got sprayed like with a fire hose with lion urine. And I think this is just something that they do to the tourists, to entertain the kids. And I mean, it was pretty entertaining. And so like I got a few droplets of lion urine in my hair, I admit. But our driver, like, that image is like burned into my memory, like just seeing him just get sprayed down with lion urine. But I think this is something that they do every time, like foreign tourists come to the Lion Zoo. At least that was my impression. But that was pretty funny. And then one other thing that we did that was really sort of momentous was that we, at the very last day before we were going to go back to the airport to get on our flight to go home, our driver took us out to this resort area where there are these couple of lakes. And so the local kids knew there. It's a couple hours outside of Addis Ababa. And then the local kids out there, they swarm the tourist cars as they're entering and leaving the resort just to get whatever. And I didn't know this, and I was so sad because I would have just bought like boxes of pens before we left Addis Ababa. So you are supposed to give them pens for school. So I was digging every pen out of my purse to give to the kids when we were getting swarmed by the local kids, when we were entering and leaving this resort. And the one other thing that was really funny was that when we flew, I think we flew first, like the first leg of our flight home, I think was from Addis Ababa to Rome. I'm pretty sure. and I'm almost positive. Well, I'm positive. I'm positive it was him. So Bradley Cooper, the actor, was on our flight. And I don't know what he was doing in Ethiopia, but in 2008 he was in Ethiopia for some reason, and he took the same flight home as me and the rest of the Human Rights Clinic, to Rome at least. So anyway, this video is getting a little long, so I'll wrap it up. I'll probably do more videos about this because people seem really interested in this topic. So okay, I love you all so much. I'll have all of my fundraising links below, and have a great night. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.